Hello everyone, this is NanthakumarN from 2325 batch of TGPBN. The topic that I have chosen for this video is the success of telecommunication reforms and the struggle of electrification reforms in India. This happens around the advent of 21st century India, and there are some factors which contribute for the success and the struggle of the respective industries, and we will see them in detail. We start with the success of the telecommunication reforms in India. So, the first factor that contributed was the dramatic expansion. To put it in perspective, there was only a 0.3% tele density in the 1980s India compared to a staggering 16.5% tele density by 2006. And also, there are only 5.1 million users of the telecommunication services during the 1990s, but in 2006, this number was dramatically increased and there were 5.2 million users of telecommunication services were added every month by then. This shows that the telecommunication services were rapidly growing during this early 2000s. And the second factor would be the allowing of the private players into the telecommunication industry. The new telecom policy of 1999 allowed the private players to take part in this telecommunication industry. Before that, the entire telecommunication industry were dominated by the public sector alone. They were namely BSNL and MTNL. The allowing of the private sectors reduced the prices of these services while also increasing the reach of these services to every nook and corner of India. The advent of cellular technology in the 1990s also increased this growth and reach. The next factor would be the key reforms and policy changes. So, as we already discussed, the new telecom policy was a key milestone in increasing and growing of the telecom industry in the early 21st century India. But this increasing private players in this sector also needed for a telecom dispute settlement and appellate tribunal. So this was set up in order to smooth out any disputes that occurs between these players, so as to ensure a fair and smooth competition. So it doesn't affect the growth of the telecom industry. The final one would be the impact of these services in the rural areas. So the growth of the telecom industry was also aimed at growing in the rural areas as well, and not only in the urban areas. So the new telecom policy was also aimed at the reach and growth of the telecom sector in the rural areas, utilizing the Universal Service Obligation Fund. So this enabled the reach of the telecommunication services in the rural part of India as well. So, for example, the tele density in the urban areas rose from 5.2% to a staggering 33%. Also, in the rural areas, it rose from a mere 0.4% to 2.2% by 2006. So, we could see that these new policies and reforms and also the entry of private players had made a dramatic change and has increased the growth of the telecommunication industries in India to a staggering amount. Now let's see the struggles faced with the electricity sector in India in the advent of 21st century. State electricity boards were majorly controlling the electricity sector in India, and let's see some of the factors which caused these struggles. The first one was financially sick state electricity boards. The state electricity boards were financially sick and owed a total of $9 billion to the central government by 2002. A bailout package was initiated in 2003 to revive the state electricity boards both operation-wise and financial-wise, but this also proved to be less fruitful. The total debt owed by state electricity boards at that time was about 1% of the total India's GDP, which was heavily subsidized. The second factor was the inefficiencies in state electricity boards. State electricity boards was overstaffed but underefficient in terms of production and distribution of power. The production and distribution losses of any SEB at that time was amounted to be 15 to 20% due to technical reasons and 20 to 25% due to commercial reasons such as theft and non-payment of bills. The plant load factor for any given state electricity board was less than national average and even less than the international average. The next factor was political and regulatory challenges. Any rationalization to tariff the electric power was shunned by both politicians and public as well. Political leaders often promise free power to farmers, which even undermine the profitability of the state electricity boards. The Electricity Act 2003 and the Electricity Regulatory Commissions Act of 1998 proved to be less efficient due to slow adoption of the state. The next factor was slow privatization of the electricity sector in India. The privatization of electricity sector in New Delhi proved to be a moderate success, but it was not very well adopted all across the country. The private players also found state electricity board to be less profitable and unattractive for them to distribute power, owing the fear of non-payment of bills. The last point was electrification in rural areas and low penetration. The penetration of the electricity sector in the rural areas was very low. In 2001, 44% of the rural community did not have electric power. This can be attributed to the both financial and operational inefficiencies faced by the state electricity boards. So this gives us a picture of why the electricity sector in India struggled a lot in terms of operational efficiency and financial efficiencies in the advent of the 21st century in India.